Let's talk trail with Scott McCoubrey, founder of Seattle Running Company,
Yep.
race director for the White River 50 Mile
Yep.
and Crystal Mountain
Sky Marathon.
Sky Marathon,
Yeah.
and now works for Scott Shoes.
Yeah, I manage the footwear division for Scott Sports in the U.S.
So you have a long history with this sport,
Yes.
very rich and storied history.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
do you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and your history and how you got into this crazy thing?
Sure. I grew up, my life revolved, or my family's life revolved around the mountains, and particularly skiing and ski racing. And after ski racing all through high school, started full-time ski racing. And the year out of high school was a big drought year in the Northwest, and I was up there to train every day. And me and a friend of mine, Dave Terry, who was also full-time ski racing at the time, we just started on those off days where there wasn't enough snow going on and stuff, just running trails around Crystal Mountain, around Mount Rainier. And as I got older and ski racing started to wane, I started running trails where my mom always took me hiking and backpacking and stuff like that, not really knowing there was other people doing it much. This was, like late 80s into the early 90s. And then just started getting into running quite a bit. And started doing some marathons and still doing my long runs back in the Alpine Lakes and the North Peak Wilderness and Rainier National Park by myself with a power bar and a water bottle, and found out there was a race up at Crystal Mountain after I came home from the Boston Marathon one year, and that's the White River 50. Ran that event, qualified for Western States, and took it over as a race director, and that was kind of my start into the sport.
Yeah.
Of trail running. It was really kind of as I was approaching the age of 30, kind of 27 range, and so I was a little older when I got into it. But from there, turned it into a profession because I started working as a sales rep in the Northwest, and was repping a brand. One of the brands I was repping, along with K2 Inline Skates and some other brands, was a brand called One Sport, and they came out with a trail running shoe called the One Sport Vitesse, and I put together a little trail running team in the Northwest that consisted of some local guys that I met through the years, and Dave Terry, Jim Kirby, a guy named Rob Lang up in BC, and then One Sport decided they would change their name to Montrail, and they changed their focus from backpacking and climbing to more of a trail running focus, and involved me in signing a contract with a gentleman named Ben Hyen at the time when it was the One Sport Vitesse, and he was, I think, probably one of, outside of, let's say, Ann Trayson, one of the first, really legitimately professional trail runners out there. And he signed a contract with One Sport and changed the name to Montrail, and that's what really kicked off my work in the sport, was coming on board with Montrail to start doing all the marketing programs for them and getting the new name out there. And they took the model that we had used in the Northwest with the trail running team that had really was successful in selling some shoes into some of the Northwest accounts, and they wanted to apply that all over the country. And that was in like 95, 96.
So these are some of the first kind of sponsored ultra running athletes.
If you want to call it that. They were my friends that I was giving
Sure.
shoes to.
Yeah, well, I mean,
and,
sponsored by something,
but yeah, it was. And then, going out and trying to apply that model to the rest of the country. I mean, the sport at the time was really regional. And I had to wait till the next ultra running magazine came out from Fred Pallon to find out who was who.
the days before the internet.
Yeah, or read about Tim Tweetmeyer in Outside Magazine and find out that he didn't have a shoe sponsors, so I'm dialing directory assistants asking for Tim Tweetmeyer's phone number to call him up, and so that's what really got me into it from a professional standpoint. And from there, really started to integrate my personal love for trail running in the mountains into my work life. And started.
Did you consciously set out to say make this kind of passion of running and outdoor sports as your profession, or did it just naturally happen? Was it something you thought about?
It was never a question for me. You know, I got done with college, and I did work in retail for Nordstrom for about 9 years, knowing that I would be taking that experience into the sporting world and in the outdoor world, which from there I started as a sales rep working for K2 and Montrail and a variety of outdoor companies. And it was great to actually get that really marketing specific job with Montrail for trail running and ultra running, which is what my love was at the time, along with skiing still. But then to kind of be the first one going out there and meeting people in the sport and bringing support to the race directors and things like that, and really trying to nationalize the sport, you know, try to get some coherence from the Northeast to the Northwest and bring some of the Northwest runners out to the events in the Northeast and get them to run against each other. And that was kind of my original goal, was to kind of create this community in a sport that was relatively regional and fragmented at the time.
Yeah. Well, were there other brands too at the time that were putting together any sort of teams or following that lead?
No, I've somewhat been attributed the idea of bringing the concept of team marketing to the sport of trail running. It was really a way to deal with no budget. Mm-hmm. You know, if I could create a community and get people excited about the people they were, you know, spending time with, and they got excited about the brand. And at the time, Montrail was about a $3 million a year company. It was primarily hiking boots, and so it was pretty small. So we didn't have a lot of budget to work with. And so I just started calling up race directors and offering to give away shoes and bring my friends out, and vice versa. And so I really got to know some really unique characters in the sport, and I found that the sport was full of unique characters, and it made for a really fun social group once David Horton started to hang out with Scott Jurek and Courtney Campbell, and you know, these guys like Leland Barker in Utah, and bringing these guys all together at different events made for a really fun community, and people got into it quite a bit. Yeah.
And then how did you transition? Because I know at some point you bought a Foot Zone, was it?
Yes.
And then turned that into Seattle Running Company?
Yes. I kind of wanted to come up with my own business and really throw myself into the sport. And with Montrail, you know, it was a great job, and we really were killing it out there. We were one of the first brands into the sport, you know, is the question you asked originally there. And after my first year of creating this team, Patagonia got wind of it. Jeannie Wall was in charge of the endurance line at the time, and it was their first foray into endurance type of clothing and running clothing. And rather than go out and try to do all that legwork, she offered to partner up with the Montrail team, and so it became a Montrail Patagonia team. And then Ultimate Direction with Dana Miller kind of started to tag along with the team that we had.
Started attracting multiple brands.
Yeah, and so I had packages to offer the athletes, and we could, you know, bring our resources together to support events. You know, if Montrail could afford 500 and so could the other two, then we had a little bit of a marketing package to bring to the table. And Ultimate Direction would, you know, Dana would donate bottles, and we'd have them logoed up with the race logo on it, and Tim Tweetmeyer and Scott Jurek are at the finish line handing out ice cold water bottles to the finishers and like that. And then it was, you know, as far as the brands go, it was really just us out there. It was me and Patagonia, and it was mostly me, the one in the field, along with the athletes. And that went on for a couple of years, and then round about 98 or so, then all of a sudden the model caught on. Trail running started to grow, and there was more exposure, I think, due to really a lot of the marketing that we were doing at Montrail. And ACG all of a sudden had a team, and then Vask came up with a team. Topher Gaylord and Dean Karnazes were traveling around to the same events that me and Scott Jurek were at for the North Face. And when those other brands came into the marketplace, they really started throwing the marketing dollars at it and started doing big glossy full page ads and stuff. And the sport kind of built right under Montreal, and with very little budget, they went from 3 million to like 14 million in like sales in about 3 years. So, being the first one there was
first mover. Yeah, that
was really why Montreal grew as fast as it did. Because then when the other companies that had a little more marketing prowess came into it, it made it a little more difficult to own all the races.
Sure.
One of the first big sponsorships I was going for was Western States, and Topher was able to outbid me because he had the North Face Power behind him, and so they were kind of, after Sunmart, the first sponsors of Western States as a shoe brand. But I was about $6,000 or $7,000 shy of being that first brand. So,
well, and it seems like, I mean, the team, it just grew really big. And I remember when I came into the sport around 2005, looking at magazines, you see the Montreal Patagonia shirts everywhere, and a lot of the big names then, you guys had like Carl Meltzer at that point in time. I don't know exactly when all those things happened, but I remember just looking through even issues of Ultrarunning magazine, you can see that it's like almost every athlete was Montreal.
Yeah, and that wasn't necessarily my vision. My vision was to create a broader community for sure, but really bring support to a team of maybe 15 guys, 15 girls, and then try to increase that support. But I left Montreal and opened Seattle Running Company, and a lot of those athletes moved to Seattle to work at Seattle Running Company so they could train together. And so it brought people to Seattle and brought people together there. And after I left Montreal, they saw the benefit of that visibility on the shirts, and they kind of went off the charts with the. I think at one time they were boasting 94 athletes, and to me, it watered it down a bit. But at the same time, it did increase that nationalization. Getting the regional boundaries broken down within the sport. And then it was right around that time that USA Track and Field started to entertain the idea of having ultra running events as national championships, and I kind of got myself involved in that for a while as well.
So do you want to name off some of your employees or people that were drawn into Seattle that maybe some of the viewers might know?
So Meltzer was on that. He was one of the early guys, but he was a Montreal athlete. There were a few folks that came in as one sport athletes. Adam Chase, Tim Tweetmeyer, Scott Jurek. I think he was on a one sport shoe. I think Scott was. Brandon Sabrowski was a one sport athlete. Luann Park, Mo Bartley, Susie Lister, some Northern Cal folks. And then David Horton got pulled into the mix. I think first year it was Montreal. Kirk Apt out of Colorado, he was winning Hard Rock in Leadville at the time. Courtney Campbell came on in the first year as a Montreal athlete. But probably the biggest visibility at the time who came in as a one sport athlete was Ben Hyen, and he was killing it out there at all the 50-mile races and AC 100, beating the Tarahumaras and stuff. And so Ben was a lot of fun to work with. And both Ben and Scott Jurek really planned their travel to events around my marketing travel plan. And so we generated a lot of stories together, traveling around and sleeping in the dirt and stuff at all these ultra events.
You have any good ones to share?
Well, there's a lot. If you want me to pull specifics, I mean, I think it's pretty interesting to see two of the most elite athletes in the sport being Scott Jurek and Ben Hyen at the time. I went out to pace Ben at Angeles Crest, and the Tarahumaras were coming. Bautista, the guy who won Leadville, and some of those really fast guys from, I don't know all their names, but and it was Jurek's first 100-mile race, and it was going to be a battle between Ben and Scott, and of course Scott and Ben were both Montreal athletes. We were all staying together. We were all great friends and stuff, and then the Tarahumarans, and it was pretty funny because I really got to know the essence of the Tarahumarans, and I had this vision from reading about them that they were this godly, ethereal, esoteric tribe up in the hills, and really all they wanted to do is drink beer and stuff and flip Ben high and crap. They saw Ben and they all came running over, Hollywood, Hollywood. They called it Hollywood. And they had their own aid stations so they could hide their antics and stuff like that. And they weren't this ethereal, kind of mythic individuals. I'm sure they have that aspect to their culture as well, but they were kind of redneck, hardcore guys, and it was hilarious being there with those guys because I just heard about these Tarahumarans and the sandals they ran in. And Jurek and I were fitting shoes at the expo beforehand, and this guy from Chia Pet, who was the Tarahumaran sponsors at the time,
oh my God.
Came over and wanted to talk about shoe sponsorship for these guys. And two of the Tarahumarans, I got to take off their sandals and take a look at them. And it's interesting because, the Tarahumarans have been the poster children for barefoot running.
Right.
The reality is this was 4 millimeter thick carbon rubber that would cut to their feet, and then they custom sanded it so it was rockered shape, scathed off right where their foot strike was, and it was more protective than any of the Montreal shoes because it was just this nice thick piece of carbon rubber. Yeah, it was exposed foot, but it was far from barefoot. It was a super protective platform, and they customized where the tapering went and stuff based on their own feel and stuff like that. But I tried to put shoes on their feet, and I took their sandals off, put a couple of Vitesse on their feet, and they stood up and they looked at each other and they just started laughing. They were just laughing at the shoes and stuff. And it became apparent that there was really going to be no shoe sponsorship for those guys. They had already gone through the Rockport thing, which was a junk show in the presentation of the Tarahumarans.
That's when is that when they sponsored them to go up to Leadville?
Yeah. And the first year they went, they all walked off the course at... I don't know the Leadville aid stations that well. It's kind of the main one in the barn, one of the first earlier aid stations, and one of the last aid stations. It might be May Queen.
Mile 13, yeah.
But, you read about this and how these guys, how they all quit. Well, it turns out that they walked off the course because they were offended, because in their culture they would come into a village and they'd get sat down and people would bring them food and stuff. And they came into this aid station and they were left to kind of do their own thing, and they all kind of walked off the course, I guess, is the way I interpreted the story. But by the time they had gotten to Angeles Crest 2 years later here when I was there, they were full-on racing Ben and Jurek, and they knew who they were. And it was really funny because Ben had this Hulk Hogan doll that he used to strap to the outside of his luggage for good luck. And when we were out there crewing and getting ready to pace, the Tarahumarans were running right with Ben and Scott for like the first 35, 40 miles. And we kept taking Hulk Hogan doll and hanging him in precarious positions by a noose on a trail sign or upside down stuffed in the dirt like a mile down the trail. And there was a French journalist there who was writing about the Tarahumarans racing Ben and whatnot. And when I read the article afterwards, the strongman doll got interpreted as a voodoo doll from the Tarahumarans that the Tarahumarans were using to curse Ben Hyatt.
And it was just you messing around.
And it was me messing around with the voodoo doll. And in the end, it was a phenomenal race. Ben ended up beating Scott by like 11 minutes or something like that, and had to run like 6-something pace in to hold Jurek off. The Tarahumarans had all blown up and dropped out when those two guys really started to turn on the race. And the other piece of the funny part of the story was just sleeping on the ground in the rain and not being able to afford a hotel for Jurek when we were down in San Diego, sleeping on the beach. And here's my elite athlete, and but Jurek liked that stuff. He preferred it to a hotel room. So, but there's one early story.
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, it sounds like, you guys just did a really grassroots level. Probably maybe you were forced to because of your budget, but also I think that's, like you said, Jurek would prefer to sleep in the sand probably, or camp out and just use that type of experience. And
the cool thing was that, as we started to get to know each other, I had Scott Jurek and Kirk Apt. We met up with Ian Torrance and went down to Mountain Masochist and all met David Horton and Eric Clifton for the first time. And immediately the energy level was just like...
Sounds like a really fun time.
It was really fun. And
just a fun time in the sport and a period of time, and now you can look back on and see, like, a lot of those guys are like now major players in the whole running industry.
Right.
Whether they're an athlete or a running store owner or a race director.
Physiology race director, yeah, like that. And there was a lot of those people. Tim Tweetmeyer coming to Sunmart to meet Bill Kokulik from here, and David Terry from the Northwest, and I put them together in a hotel room, and it's just the personalities really got along great. And the first year we did the national championship, 2000 at White River 50, we have a cabin up there that houses about 30 people, and we had about 35 people say yes to the invites that year, and I was like surprised because Ian Torrance was dialing for dollars to get people to come out. Everybody showed up, and next thing you know, you got Tim Tweetmeyer sleeping behind the couch, and you got Robin Maxwell sleeping on the bridge outside. It was overstuffed in the cabin, but it was really funny to watch Ann Tracing come in and go, "Hey, is that David Horton over there?" And Courtney Campbell coming in and going, "Hey, is that Ann Tracing over there?" And we'd all read about each other in Ultra Running magazine, but it was really neat to see the
bringing
faces.
That community together.
And that was what the national championship thing did in those early years. It brought everybody together. We invited people. We paid for some airline tickets. We had a $10,000 prize purse and 2001, and because we could house people affordably, it wasn't a cost, we were able to kind of bring the people I'd met in those first couple of years. Mm-hmm. And then with Seattle Running Company, we were able to promote it to the local community, and it was really neat to see all those people come together at a national championship early on in trail running like that. But,
wow.
Yeah.
And then I guess, what came next? You owned Seattle Running Company for a number of years, but you no longer do that.
Right. So I opened Seattle Running Company. Jurek was just finishing kind of his residencies in South Dakota with his PT business and was looking for something to do. And so when I decided to open the store, he decided to move to Seattle and help open the store and try to make some inroads into the physical therapy world while he helped me get the store rolling. And then like the second day we were open, me and Jurek are standing behind the counter, and this really nice looking, really spunky little girl walks in, and she's all tan and smiling as he's looking at the two of us like, I'm looking for John. I'm like, John's not here at the store anymore. I just recently bought the store and opened it. She goes, well, I'm looking for my summer job. And that was Chrissy Mail. And so I hired her on the spot. It took us a while to get her onto the trails, but then Chrissy Mail came into the fold right out of college. And then Brandon Sobrowski moved because he was going out with Chrissy. And then Hal Kerner moved to Seattle and was working at the store. And so we had Chrissy Mail, Scott Jurek, Hal Kerner, Brandon Sobrowski, and then a name that a lot of people don't necessarily know, but William Emerson at the time, he is still probably to this day has the record for the most wins in a year, like 27 wins off the ultra running calendar in 1 year, which is why ACG got backed out of it, because I think he bankrupted the ACG program, much to the chagrin
all the sponsor winnings, the bonuses.
Well, Dave Mackey and I think Nikki Kimball were on the team at the year, and Nikki made a comment to me that William Emerson bankrupted
Is the ACG, what is that?
team.
Is that Nike?
Yeah, so at the time, Nike was, their outdoor product fell under the umbrella of the ACG line for them, all conditioned gear.
Oh, okay.
And ACG went away after Kirk Richardson kind of just took over the whole gig for running there. And so the ACG doesn't exist anymore, but it was their trail running lineup, fell under that ACG thing, so it was the ACG team at the time. But yeah, and then we kind of had this transition. A couple people would leave and a couple more ultra runners would come in, so our second generation included Phil Kochek and Brian Morrison and Adam Lint. So we kind of had this rotation of ultra runners coming in, and the neat thing was that the environment and the training and the running was all so good that those guys were working for me for 3 to 6 years each. It wasn't like a typical retail scene where someone would come work for a summer and go away. Yeah. We were hanging out.
There was more to keep them around and everything.
And a fun story out of that whole scenario is that 3 of those guys ended up marrying 3 different Montreal girls. And so the funny thing is they had Scott Jurek, Brandon Sobrowski, and Hal Kerner. They were all Montreal athletes when I worked at Montreal. I opened Seattle Running Company, and all 3 of those guys started working for Seattle Running Company. And while they were working at Seattle Running Company, they all married girls that worked at Montreal. So it was kind of funny the way that worked out as well. It's kind of this. But so we had Seattle Running Company for about 11 years, and ended up selling the store. And Scott Sports hired me to move to Sun Valley, Idaho, which has been a place I've dreamed of living since I was in 4th grade. It was the family vacation spot every year for skiing. And so when that opportunity to move to Sun Valley and work for Scott Sports came up, I jumped on it right away. And the job was great because it combined my knowledge of retail, design and production work, and marketing all into one job in the footwear industry, which has really evolved into primarily a trail running shoe brand. So it's great to go from being more that running and racing person to now be able to not have to run and race as fast and still benefit from being around all my friends and have a good job in the industry.
Yeah, so talk to us a little more about Scott. I don't know, do you maybe want to talk about the shoes a little bit too, or just maybe what you do for them and how that's going?
Yeah, so I mean originally Scott Sports, because of their bikes, I mean they're like 75% of their business worldwide is bike. They're number 2 in Europe in bike, and then they've got a big, huge ski history. They introduced the aluminum ski pole to the world market, the clamshell ski boot, and the aero bar are some of their innovations. And so they're a really innovative company. And so when I heard they were getting into the running shoe market, it was pretty interesting. And first I started repping for them while we still had the store in the Northwest. And Scott Tucker, who was the president of Montreal when I worked for Montreal, he got hired by Scott Sports, and then he came to me to see if I wanted to help rep the brand and if the store would carry it, which we did. And then he left and went to Pearl Izumi, and that opened the door for me to move to Sun Valley and manage the brand. So the job itself is kind of all-encompassing. I'm kind of the one-man junk show there. I write all the orders for the U.S., help with the product development. I'm in charge of the marketing, so I'm the marketing director, and most of my time is spent on sales management, traveling around and helping people sell the shoes into the marketplace. Yeah. But evolving out of triathlon, they really came up with this innovative platform that was addressing the changing foot strike of a fatiguing athlete in the Hawaii Ironman event, because these guys were getting off our time trial bikes and breaking the record and then falling apart in the run. And once we started taking that platform and running it on the trail, it became very evident how versatile it was for varied terrain. And then because of their mountain heritage in Europe, they took that road running piece and then started really going after the trail running market. In about 5 years, they've come full circle into being primarily a trail running brand, although they still have a super nice performing road line too. And so that's really where the brand has hung their hat from a marketing standpoint, and it was perfect for me because that's where my background was and my love for trail and skiing. Now I'm working for a company that has some of the best ski products out there and shoes with some of the best skiing and trail running in the world, just right out my door.
Now, how has the marketing world changed? You know, I mean, you were part of Montreal back when it was just first starting to today. I mean, now we see, there's a lot of athletes out there. There's a lot of teams. Yeah. There's a lot of money behind them. I mean, what have you seen?
It's really different. It's when you come into a brand that's relatively new in the marketplace, I'm really comfortable because it's just like being back in the Montreal day where you don't have all that money that these other guys do. But I've got a lot of experience in the grassroots piece of it. Yeah. And so the other thing is having White River 50 and the skyrunning event that my wife and I put on together. Those are like White River is one of the premier stops on the ultrarunning tour. It's 23 years now. And so it's really established, and the course records there are super stout. I mean, you're talking about fields that were 25 deep racing for $2,500 back in 2000 when there's no other prize money. And so course records are Anton and Uli Steidl, and then so when Sage Canady broke Anton's course records, that was recognizable.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know, and when Justin Howe was the third fastest run, you know, he told me that really helped with his Solomon sponsorship, because Adam Chase knew who he was, the times he was going up against.
Yeah,
and so those events combined with my history give me exposure to the new and up and coming athletes. Mm-hmm. And so like with Sage, he did that, and I immediately signed him on as a Scott guy, right?
Right.
And Solomon beat me to Justin, but they had the money.
Right.
And so from a grassroots standpoint, I'm still finding the young guys. We're working with Alex Nichols and Brian Senseman and a guy named Cody Lind, who's a 20-year-old out of Chalice, Idaho. And these guys are all young up-and-comers, as opposed to throwing down a chunk of change to get an established athlete that's been around a lot longer. Not that those guys don't have some good results, but they're just getting started.
Yeah.
And so that's where I tried to put my focus. It was kind of the same thing early on. I wanted to find that next guy out there that was going to come in. And it was really fun to go with Scott Jurek at a young age over to Western States. Northern Cal thought, you know, there was nobody outside of Northern Cal that was going to win Western States. Even when he was leading at the river, they were still convinced he wasn't going to win.
Was he still from Minnesota at the time, or was he?
He was living in Seattle.
He was in Seattle.
Yeah, okay. That was the first year we opened the store.
Yeah. So you have a local guy that goes down there and takes it.
Yeah, and it was pretty interesting to see, you know, everybody thought for sure that Tim Tweetmeyer's experience was going to trump Jurek's young zeal, you know, going, yelling he'd come out of every HS and you know, and most of the sport wasn't used to seeing that. And so, some young guy's leading. I was pacing Dave Terry.
The guy's going to blow up.
Exactly. And I was pacing Dave Terry, and so we were in like 5th place when I was pacing him. They're like, some young guy's leading, but he's going to fall apart. Tweetmeyer's going to pass him. And Tweetmeyer made a big push from 24 minutes back to 7 minutes, but then he couldn't close that last 7 minutes there. And he said, Tweetmeyer was like, couldn't do it.
Wow.
But it was really fun to have that new young up-and-comer that surprised everybody at the finish line. And that's kind of an exciting piece of the athlete management side of things. But so you find those young guys that are up-and-coming, not necessarily the ones that are already winning races, and hope that you can make a go of it that way. And I think we've got a good little base forming this last year. I just reforming a team. We had some really strong athletes 2 years ago, but I took a little hiatus away from Scott through some transitions, and then came back just this last year again. And so I'm reformalizing a team, and it should be good.
Are you still running ultras yourself these days?
Occasionally, and I probably shouldn't be. I had lateral discectomy surgery after I laterally blew L4, L5. I paralyzed my left leg, and this was just before we sold the store. Left me with some pretty serious central nervous system damage. But the more I skied, the more I pushed it, the more uncomfortable I made myself, the further I could go. And year before last, I actually jumped into a couple of ultras, and where I didn't think I would be able to run an ultra again. It's really pretty much the 50K distance. I can't really orchestrate a training plan, but I just go run in the mountains out of my house enough to where I can go jump into a 50K occasionally now and then. And it's really helped me refine my love for skiing now. And the last 8 years I've been doing some pretty amazing ski stuff in the backcountry and in Alaska and a variety of different places.
Well, you've got great access right where you are.
Oh, it's, skinning right out of the door. That's how I walk the dog. You know, I can ski into my backyard from the ski area, get done skiing, throw the skins on, and go do a couple backcountry pushes with the dog after I'm done skiing in the ski area all day. And then the same thing holds true once the snow melts out. The last month here in the spring, I've been skiing and then trail running on all the south slopes after I ski during the day. And then it all kind of ties in with my job, so it works out good.
Cool. Any, I guess, tips for our viewers out there on just ultra running or the sport, or anything you want to say or add?
It's pretty interesting. You know, I keep reading about how much the sport is growing, and I see the times getting faster and faster, but it's still really this small, really tight, cool community. And I think the term we're giving it now is destination running. And what the sport of ultra running has done is has turned running into this destination kind of thing. I mean, it was kind of that way with a lot of marathons before, but now you can go spend a weekend at Mount Rainier National Park or in the Canyonlands, or and bring the family along. And we try to gear our events around that, like at White River, make it a really comfortable place to bring the whole family and spend the whole weekend. And the biggest change in the sport overall has been the international travel and the accessibility to events around the world. And it's a great way to go see the vast wildernesses outside of your own backyard. Is pick a race in
You
the
get the
Canary
support,
Islands,
it's all set up, yeah.
or in Venezuela, and train for it. So you get your exercise, you do your running, and then bring the family along and do a vacation and see some amazingly beautiful spaces. And I think that's one of the coolest things about the sport, is the way it's developed now, and it becomes such a neat vacation getaway to the everyday world. And it gives you that in your everyday work life too. You find your little piece of trail around your house, or that 1 mile strip you can go back and forth on by the office when you're in the city or something like that. It just gives you this little piece of solitude on a daily basis, and also on a bigger scale with the vacation and the travel side of it. Yeah, it's kind of neat the way it's developed that way.
Great. Well, we have a segment now. We call it Trail Fail. And so this is like a website that has a bump, bruise, or fall from the trail. And so we're just going to view one of them.
Okay.
And we'll just get our reactions.
Okay. I better put my glasses on.
Put the glasses on.
So I can see it.
All right, so let's see what we got here. All right. Trail fail from Western States. Does that look familiar? You ever seen something like that before?
Yeah, it looks like my feet every day.
A nice blister right here.
Yeah, that's good. I like the toenails probably missing. That's why they had to tape it over.
Yeah.
First time I ran Western States, I got blisters between every toe. And then I found this cotton toe sock from a Japanese company that the owner of, or the president of Montreal at the time, had brought me. And that was the first time I found a way to avoid those toe blisters. But my guess is they need a little bit more room around the pinky toe area of their shoe.
A little wider
right?
shoe, yeah.
Is that your foot?
No. I think that was submitted by someone. I'm not sure who. It's not attributed to anyone.
That's a good blister. You want me to tell you a little story based on that that photo right there?
Sure.
So Dave Terry, who was one of the early hot runners back in the day, in the 90s, was my best friend growing up, and we ski raced together. I convinced him to run White River with me when we were at the 100th running in the Boston. He's like, he thought I was crazy. I'm like, dude, 75 other people do it. We can do it too. And so he agreed. He ends up getting third place. We both qualified for Western States. And so next thing you know, our third ultra is running Western States. So after the race, my wife's driving the car, and she's been with some of Dave's friends crewing all night, so they weren't exactly meshing really well together. They were all sick of each other, right? Yeah. And Dave's got this huge blood blister underneath his big toe. It's raised up about this far, and he's wearing his Birkenstocks. And we pull into a gas pump. Dave jumps out, and I'm talking to Leslie, and one of Dave's buddies is like telling Leslie what to do. Back up, back up. She's like, okay, I'll back up. And she backs up and rolls right over Dave's toe.
Oh, God.
And I watched this blood just do this perfect arc. Like I'm standing there, Dave's standing there, and this blood goes whoop. And the funny thing is, he didn't even have a reaction. His eyes just followed the blood in the arc and where it hit. And he looks at me and he goes, guess I don't have to pop it now. So anyway.
Cool. All right, well, thank you to Scott McCoubrey for being on the show today.
You bet.
And best of luck with Scott Sports. We're having them out tonight at our group trail run. So we're excited to give them a try.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for your work in the sport now.
Sure.
Picking up the baton and running with it, man.
Yeah, of course.